The HOA officer's face turned bright red as she stood on my porch, her clipboard shaking in her trembling hands. I had just quietly revealed 3 simple words that made her realize she had made a terrible mistake. Behind me, through the half-open door, she could see my study wall covered with framed certificates, commendations, and a photograph of me shaking hands with the President of the United States. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. The confident, bossy woman, who had been yelling at me just moments ago, suddenly looked very small and scared. I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Mr. Patterson, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper now. But what had I said to make her react this way? What had she done that brought her to my doorstep in the first place? And what was going to happen next? Before I tell you what happens, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Are you from California, Texas, New York, or somewhere else? I'd love to know. And if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. Now, let me take you back to where this all started, 3 weeks before that shocking confrontation on my porch. My name is Harold Patterson, and I'm 72 years old. Most people in Meadowbrook Hills, the quiet neighborhood where I live, just know me as the friendly old man in the house at the end of Maple Street. I keep to myself mostly, tend my small garden, and enjoy the peaceful retirement I worked so hard for. The young families on my street wave when they drive by, and sometimes their children stop to pet my old golden retriever, Buddy. I like it that way. Simple, quiet, and private. What my neighbors don't know is that I spent 35 years serving my country. I wasn't just any government employee. I was a commander in the United States Secret Service, one of the highest ranks you can achieve. I protected 3 different presidents during my career, traveled to over 60 countries, and received more medals and commendations than I can count. I've stood between danger and the most powerful people in the world. I've made split-second decisions that saved lives. I've seen things that would make your hair stand on end, but I don't talk about any of that. When I retired 5 years ago, I decided I wanted a normal life. I was tired of the stress, the constant vigilance, the weight of responsibility. I bought a nice little house on 2 acres of land in Meadowbrook Hills, brought Buddy with me, and started enjoying the simple pleasures I'd missed for decades. Morning coffee on the porch, working in my garden, reading books under my oak tree, and just being at peace. My property is special to me. It's surrounded by tall pine trees that create a natural barrier between my house and the rest of the neighborhood. I have a small pond in the back where frogs sing at night. There's a vegetable garden where I grow tomatoes, cucumbers, and green beans. And right in the middle of my land, there's a beautiful old oak tree that must be at least 200 years old. I built a simple wooden bench underneath it, and that's where I spend most of my afternoons. The neighborhood itself is governed by a homeowners association, or HOA for short. When I bought my house, I read through all the rules and regulations carefully. My property was a bit different from the others. It was larger and had been grandfathered in before some of the newer, stricter rules were put in place. The real estate agent assured me that as long as I kept my property neat and didn't disturb my neighbors, I'd have no problems. For the first 4 years, that was absolutely true. I never heard a word from the HOA. I paid my dues on time, kept my grass cut, and maintained my house. I was the model homeowner, quiet and considerate. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. The HOA elected new officers, and that's when I first heard the name Margaret Vance. Margaret was a woman in her late 40s who had recently moved to Meadowbrook Hills with her husband, a lawyer at some big firm downtown. She had immediately gotten involved in the neighborhood association, attending every meeting, volunteering for every committee, and making her presence known. Within 3 months, she had been elected HOA president, beating out the previous president, who had served peacefully for 8 years. The neighborhood chat group, which I didn't participate in but my next-door neighbor, sweet old Mrs. Chen, kept me informed about, started buzzing with complaints almost immediately. Margaret was strict. No, strict wasn't the right word. She was obsessive. She would drive around the neighborhood with a clipboard, writing down violations. A basketball hoop left in a driveway overnight? Violation. Christmas lights still up on January 2nd? Violation. A car parked in front of your own house instead of in the garage? Violation. Mrs. Chen told me that Margaret had given her a warning because her mailbox was the wrong shade of black, according to the HOA guidelines. Another neighbor, Tom Rodriguez, got a citation because his lawn was a 1/4 inch taller than the maximum allowed height. People were getting frustrated, but Margaret had the HOA rules on her side, even if she was interpreting them in the strictest possible way. I felt bad for my neighbors, but I figured I was safe. My property was well maintained, I followed all the rules, and I mostly kept to myself. I had no reason to think Margaret Vance would ever have a problem with me. I was wrong. It started on a beautiful Tuesday morning in late spring. I woke up at 6 o'clock, like I do every morning, and made myself a pot of coffee. Buddy and I went for our usual walk around my property, checking on the garden and enjoying the fresh morning air. The birds were singing. The sun was just starting to peek through the trees, and everything felt perfect. After breakfast, I decided to spend the afternoon under my oak tree. I grabbed my favorite book, a thick novel about World War II that I'd been working through, and headed out to my bench, with Buddy trotting along beside me. The spot under that oak tree is my sanctuary. The branches create a natural canopy that provides shade, and there's always a gentle breeze. It's far enough from the road that I can't hear traffic, and the nearest neighbor's house is hidden by the trees. I settled onto my bench, opened my book, and let the peace of the moment wash over me. Buddy curled up at my feet and fell asleep almost immediately. For about an hour, the only sounds were the rustling of leaves, the occasional bird call, and the turning of pages. Then I heard it, the sound of an engine, getting closer. A car was driving down my long driveway. I looked up, surprised. I wasn't expecting anyone. The mailman had already come that morning, and I hadn't ordered any packages. Through the trees, I could see a white SUV approaching. It parked near my house, and a woman in pressed khaki pants and a polo shirt stepped out, clipboard in hand. Even from a distance, I could tell who it was. Margaret Vance had come to visit. I watched as she walked around my house, peering into windows and making notes on her clipboard. Then she spotted me sitting under the oak tree. She started walking across my lawn toward me, her sensible shoes making sharp sounds against the ground even through the grass. Buddy lifted his head and gave a soft woof, not aggressive, just announcing that someone was coming. I patted his head to let him know it was okay, even though I was beginning to feel a knot of concern in my stomach. "Excuse me," Margaret called out when she was still about 30 feet away. "Excuse me, sir." I closed my book and stood up politely. "Good afternoon," I said calmly. "Can I help you?" She marched right up to me, her face already showing signs of disapproval. Up close, Margaret was a thin woman with sharp features, and hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her eyes were scanning my property like she was searching for evidence of a crime. "I'm Margaret Vance, president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association," she announced, as if I should be impressed. "And you are Harold Patterson, correct?" "That's right," I said, still keeping my tone friendly. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Vance." She didn't return the pleasantry. Instead, she looked down at her clipboard, and then back at me. "Mr. Patterson, I've received complaints about your property." That caught me off guard. "Complaints? About what?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "About your use of this land. Multiple neighbors have reported that you spend excessive amounts of time sitting out here, just loitering on your own property. They find it odd and somewhat concerning." I blinked, not sure I'd heard her correctly. "I'm sorry, did you just say I'm loitering? On my own property?" "The HOA has regulations about property use," she said, tapping her clipboard. "All activities on residential properties must be consistent with normal residential behavior. Sitting alone in the middle of your yard for hours at a time is not normal behavior." I felt a surge of disbelief, but I kept my voice calm. Years of Secret Service training had taught me to never lose my cool, even in absurd situations. "Mrs. Vance, I'm simply sitting under a tree on my own land, reading a book. I'm not disturbing anyone. I'm not making noise. I'm not doing anything illegal or against the rules." "That's your interpretation," she said sharply. "I interpret the rules differently. Furthermore, I've noticed that your property line is not clearly marked. You have no fence, no markers. How do we know you're not encroaching on common area property?" "Because I have a survey from when I bought the house," I replied, my patience starting to wear thin. "My property is exactly where it's supposed to be. Everything I'm doing is well within my property boundaries." Margaret made a note on her clipboard, which seemed to be her way of showing she didn't believe me. "I'll need to see that survey, and in the meantime, I'm going to have to ask you to limit your outdoor sitting time to no more than 1 hour per day." Now I was genuinely angry, though I didn't show it. "You're telling me how long I can sit on my own property?" "I'm telling you what the HOA regulations require," she said, her voice getting louder and more aggressive. "We have standards in this neighborhood, Mr. Patterson. Standards that everyone must follow. Just because you live on a larger lot doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. This is a community, and we have rules for a reason." Buddy, sensing the tension, stood up and moved closer to me. He wasn't growling or showing any aggression. That wasn't his nature, but he was alert and protective. "Your dog is off leash," Margaret said, pouncing on this new violation. "HOA rules clearly state that all dogs must be leashed when outside, even on private property. That rule applies to common areas and front yards," I corrected her. "On my own private land, behind my house, I'm allowed to have my dog unleashed as long as he's under voice control, which he is." Margaret's face was getting redder. She wasn't used to people challenging her. I don't appreciate your argumentative tone, Mr. Patterson. I am the HOA president, and I am here on official business. You need to show some respect. I've been nothing but respectful, I said quietly. You're the one who came onto my property, made accusations, and started making unreasonable demands. Unreasonable? Her voice was almost a shout now. I'll tell you what's unreasonable. An old man sitting alone in his yard all day looking suspicious. How do we know you're not doing something illegal out here? How do we know you're not watching people? Maybe you're some kind of creep. Maybe I should call the police and have them check you out. That was the moment things escalated from absurd to dangerous. The accusation hung in the air like poison. She had just called me, a man who had spent 35 years protecting the highest office in the land, a potential criminal, a creep, someone who should be reported to the police. I felt my jaw tighten. In all my years dealing with actual threats, dangerous situations, and high-pressure moments, I'd learned to control my emotions. But standing there, being accused of something so vile on my own property, by someone who knew nothing about me, tested that control like few things ever had. Buddy sensed the shift in my demeanor and pressed against my leg. I took a deep breath and looked Margaret Vance directly in the eyes. Mrs. Vance, I said, my voice low and measured. I'm going to give you one chance to apologize for what you just said and leave my property peacefully. She actually laughed. It was a sharp, bitter sound. Apologize? To you? I don't think so. In fact, I'm going to recommend to the HOA board that we conduct a full investigation into your activities, and if you don't comply with my instructions about limiting your outdoor time, I'll make sure there are consequences. We can fine you. We can put a lien on your property. We have power, Mr. Patterson, and you'd better start taking this seriously. I take a lot of things seriously, I replied. But this isn't one of them. Now please leave. Margaret jabbed her finger toward me, her clipboard shaking with anger. Don't you tell me what to do. This is HOA business. I have every right to be here, and I'm not going anywhere until you agree to comply with the regulations. You have no right to be here, I said firmly. You're on my private property. I've asked you to leave. If you don't leave now, you're trespassing. Trespassing? She was practically screaming now. How dare you? I'm an HOA officer. I have authority here. Not on my private land. You don't. Margaret's face was purple with rage. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space, her finger still pointing at my chest. Listen here, you stubborn old fool. I don't know who you think you are, but in this neighborhood, I'm in charge. Me. And you're going to do what I say, or I will make your life miserable. I will find every single violation, every tiny infraction, and I will bury you in fines and legal fees until you either comply or move out of Meadowbrook Hills, entirely. She was close enough now that I could see the veins in her neck bulging, the spittle at the corners of her mouth. This woman had completely lost control. And over what? An old man reading a book under a tree? Are you threatening me, Mrs. Vance? I asked quietly. I'm promising you, she hissed. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I've gotten rid of problem homeowners before, and I'll get rid of you too. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd never moved to this neighborhood. That was when Buddy did something he'd never done before in all the years I'd had him. He growled, not loud, not aggressive, but a low, warning growl that said he didn't like this woman threatening his owner. Margaret jumped back as if she'd been electrocuted. Did you see that? Your vicious dog just threatened me. That's it. I'm calling animal control right now. That dog is dangerous and needs to be removed from this neighborhood immediately. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. Something inside me snapped. Not violently, not aggressively, but decisively. I'd had enough. This woman had crossed every line, made every wrong assumption, and now she was threatening my dog, my loyal companion, who had never hurt anyone in his entire life. Put the phone down, I said, and there must have been something in my voice that made her pause, because she stopped dialing and looked at me with wide eyes. For the first time since she'd arrived, Margaret Vance looked uncertain. I gave you a chance to leave peacefully, I continued, my voice still calm, but carrying an authority that decades of command had built into it. You refused. You've made false accusations. You've threatened me with legal action. And now you're trying to have my dog taken away because he growled once when you were acting aggressively toward his owner. So here's what's going to happen next. Margaret tried to regain her composure, drawing herself up to her full height. You can't tell me what to. I'm going to walk you back to your car, I interrupted. You're going to get in it, drive away, and you're not going to come back onto my property without a formal, written invitation. Do you understand? Or what? She challenged, though her voice wavered slightly. What are you going to do, old man? Assault me? Then you'll really be in trouble. I didn't answer. I just started walking toward her car, and after a moment of confusion, she followed, still sputtering threats and warnings. When we reached her white SUV, she turned to face me one more time. "This isn't over, Mr. Patterson. Not by a long shot. Tomorrow, the entire HOA board is going to hear about this. I'm going to recommend we take you to court for non-compliance, harassment, and having a dangerous animal. And when we're done with you, you'll be lucky if you still have a home to live in." She got in her car, slammed the door, and peeled out of my driveway so fast her tires spun on the gravel. I stood there watching her disappear, Buddy sitting calmly at my side. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of confrontation. I hadn't felt this way since my last day in the Secret Service. "Well, Buddy," I said, looking down at my faithful friend, "I think we might have a problem." He looked up at me with his big brown eyes and wagged his tail once, as if to say, "We've handled worse." And he was right, we had. But this was different. This wasn't a matter of national security or protecting someone's life. This was personal. This was my home, my peace, my retirement that was being threatened by a power-hungry HOA president who thought she could bully an old man into submission. I went back inside and spent the rest of the afternoon thinking. Should I just comply with her ridiculous demands to keep the peace? Should I fight back? Should I reveal who I really was and use my connections to shut her down? No. That last option wasn't who I was anymore. I'd left that life behind. I was just Harold Patterson now, retired and trying to live quietly, but I also wasn't going to let someone push me around on my own property. That evening, I called my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She answered on the second ring, her cheerful voice a welcome contrast to Margaret's harsh tones. "Harold, how lovely to hear from you. Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Did Margaret Vance happen to mention she was coming to see me today?" There was a pause. "Oh no, she got to you too?" "She did. Can I ask you something?" "She said she'd received complaints about me from neighbors. Do you know anything about that?" Mrs. Chen made a dismissive sound. "Harold, that woman makes things up. She claims to have received complaints about half the neighborhood. I don't believe for a second that anyone complained about you. You're the quietest, most respectful neighbor we have. What did she say you were doing wrong?" I explained the whole encounter, including Margaret's accusation and her threat to have Buddy taken away. By the time I finished, Mrs. Chen was making angry clicking sounds with her tongue. "That woman has gone too far," she said. "Way too far. Harold, you need to know something. There's a group of us in the neighborhood who are planning to challenge Margaret at the next HOA meeting. We're going to call for a vote of no confidence. She's alienated almost everyone with her ridiculous rules and power trips. Would you be willing to come to the meeting and tell the board what happened today?" I hesitated. Public confrontation wasn't really my style anymore. But then I thought about Margaret's threat, her accusations, and the way she'd tried to weaponize the HOA against me. "Yes," I said. "I'll be there." "When is it?" "Next Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, at the community center. And Harold, don't let her intimidate you. A lot of us have your back." That made me feel better. I thanked Mrs. Chen and hung up. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting another visit from Margaret, or maybe a letter from the HOA, but nothing came. I continued my normal routine, morning walks with Buddy, working in the garden, reading under my oak tree, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. On Friday afternoon, that feeling proved correct. I was in my vegetable garden, pulling weeds from around my tomato plants, when I heard cars pulling into my driveway. Not just one car, several cars. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees, and walked around to the front of the house. What I saw made my blood run cold. Margaret Vance was back, but this time she hadn't come alone. She'd brought 5 other people with her, all members of the HOA board, based on the matching polo shirts they were wearing. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. Behind them, parked at the end of my driveway, was a county animal control van. Margaret saw me and a smile spread across her face. Not a friendly smile, but a triumphant, vindictive smile that made her look almost cruel. "Mr. Patterson," she called out loudly, making sure her voice carried. "We're here on official HOA business, and we've brought the proper authorities. We're going to need you to surrender your dog immediately. He's been deemed a danger to the neighborhood." I walked toward the group slowly, my mind racing. Behind me, I heard Buddy bark from inside the house where I'd left him. He must have heard the commotion. The animal control officer, a young man who looked uncomfortable with the whole situation, stepped forward with a clipboard. "Sir, I'm Officer James Martinez with County Animal Control. I've received a formal complaint about an aggressive dog at this address. I'm going to need to ask you some questions and possibly take the animal into custody pending an investigation." "On what grounds?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Margaret jumped in before the officer could respond. "On the grounds that your vicious animal threatened me." It growled and showed aggressive behavior. "I have witnesses." She gestured to the HOA board members behind her, and 2 of them nodded. though they looked uncertain. Were any of you actually there when this supposed incident occurred? I asked the board members directly. They shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a man in his 60s with gray hair, spoke up. Well, no, but Margaret told us, so you're taking her word for it, I said. We have to investigate all complaints, the animal control officer said, and I could hear the apology in his voice. He was just doing his job, caught in the middle of something that obviously felt wrong to him. If you could just bring the dog out, I can assess the situation, and… No, I said firmly. Margaret's eyes lit up with glee. Did you hear that? He's refusing to comply. Officer, you have the authority to remove that animal by force if necessary. The officer looked even more uncomfortable. Sir, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. If the dog is not aggressive, this will all get cleared up very quickly, but I do need to see the animal. I was about to respond when I heard another car coming up the driveway. We all turned to look. It was Mrs. Chen's little blue sedan, and she wasn't alone. Behind her were 3 more cars, Tom Rodriguez, the Hendersons from 2 streets over, and old Mr. Abernathy, a retired judge who lived near the neighborhood entrance. They all parked and got out, looking at the scene with concern. What's going on here? Mrs. Chen demanded, marching up to Margaret with her small frame somehow seeming imposing. Harold, are you all right? They're trying to take Buddy, I said simply. Over my dead body, Mrs. Chen declared, and several of the other neighbors murmured their agreement. Margaret's face was red again. This is official business. You people have no right to interfere. We have every right, Mr. Abernathy said in his deep authoritative voice. I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years, and I've never seen such abuse of HOA authority. Young man, he addressed the animal control officer. On what specific evidence are you here to seize this man's dog? Officer Martinez looked at his paperwork. I received a complaint that the dog displayed aggressive behavior toward a resident. From whom? Mr. Abernathy asked. From Mrs. Vance, the officer admitted. And do you have any other witnesses? Any video evidence? Any photographs of injuries? Anything besides one person's uncorroborated claim? The officer hesitated. Well, no. But then you have no grounds to seize the animal, Mr. Abernathy stated flatly. I may be retired, but I'm still a member of the bar, and I know the law. You need evidence of actual aggressive behavior, not just someone's word. Has this dog ever bitten anyone? Has it been reported before? No, sir, Officer Martinez admitted, checking his records. This is the first complaint ever filed against this animal. There you have it, Mr. Abernathy said, turning to Margaret. This is harassment, pure and simple. And if you proceed with this, Mrs. Vance, I will personally ensure that Mr. Patterson has legal representation to fight it. Margaret looked like she was about to explode. Her carefully orchestrated ambush was falling apart, and she knew it. The other HOA board members were backing away slightly, clearly realizing they'd been manipulated into participating in something questionable. This is ridiculous, Margaret shouted. You're all ganging up on me. I'm trying to protect this neighborhood, and you're defending a man who refuses to follow the rules. Well, fine. If you won't help me, I'll take this to the next level. I'm going to file a lawsuit against Mr. Patterson for creating a hostile living environment. I'm going to have him removed from this neighborhood one way or another. She spun on her heel and stormed toward her car, leaving the confused HOA board members and the animal control officer standing there awkwardly. Officer Martinez turned to me apologetically. Sir, I'm sorry about this. Without any evidence or history of aggression, I can't proceed with a seizure. The complaint will remain on file, but unless there's another incident with actual evidence, your dog is fine. Thank you, officer, I said sincerely. I appreciate your professionalism. He nodded and headed back to his van, clearly relieved to be leaving. The HOA board members approached me hesitantly. The gray-haired man who had spoken earlier stepped forward. Mr. Patterson, I want to apologize. Margaret told us this was a serious safety issue, and we trusted her judgment. We had no idea she was. Well, she's out of control, one of the women added. This isn't the first time she's done something like this, but it's definitely the worst. We're going to have to address this at the board meeting. They left soon after, and my neighbors gathered around me in a protective circle. Are you okay, Harold? Tom Rodriguez asked. I'm fine, I assured them. Thank you all for coming. How did you know? Mrs. Chen called us, Tom said. She saw all the cars heading to your place and figured Margaret was up to something. Mrs. Chen patted my arm. We look out for each other in this neighborhood. Well, most of us do. Margaret Vance is not representative of who we are. They all stayed for a while, chatting and offering support, before gradually heading home. As the sun began to set, I found myself alone again with Buddy, who had finally stopped barking inside the house. I let him out, and he immediately ran to me, tail wagging furiously. I knelt down and hugged him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against mine. "You're safe, boy," I whispered. "I won't let anyone take you away." But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't over. Margaret had made a threat. She was going to file a lawsuit. And knowing her vindictive nature, she would follow through. I spent the weekend preparing. I pulled out my property survey, my HOA documents, and every piece of paperwork related to my house. I documented everything that had happened, writing down dates, times, and exact quotes as best as I could remember. If this was going to become a legal battle, I wanted to be ready. On Monday morning, I received a certified letter. My hands shook slightly as I opened it, though I already knew what it would say. It was from a law firm representing Margaret Vance and the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. They were officially notifying me of multiple violations: improper property use, failure to maintain clear property boundaries, harboring a dangerous animal, and creating a disturbance within the community. I had 30 days to remedy all violations or face legal action, including potential foreclosure on my property through HOA liens. I read the letter 3 times, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Every single accusation was either false or a gross exaggeration. This wasn't about HOA rules. This was about Margaret's wounded pride and her need to win at any cost. I was still holding the letter when my phone rang. It was Mr. Abernathy. "Harold, I just got word that Margaret's made her move," he said without preamble. "Did you receive a letter? I'm holding it now. Don't respond to it yet. I've been talking to some of the other neighbors, and we want to help. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything in your background, anything at all, that Margaret could use against you in court? Any criminal record, any problems in your past?" I almost laughed. If only he knew. "No criminal record," I said. "Nothing she could use." "Good. Then here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow night's HOA meeting is going to be crucial. We need to show up in force and demand Margaret's removal as president. But more importantly, we need to show that the neighborhood supports you, not her. Can you be there?" "I'll be there," I promised. Tuesday arrived faster than I expected. I spent the day trying to keep my normal routine, but my mind kept drifting to the meeting ahead. What would I say? How would Margaret react? Would the board actually listen to the neighbors, or would they side with their president? At 6:30, I got dressed in a simple button-down shirt and slacks, nothing too formal, but respectable. I wanted to look like exactly what I was. A retired man who just wanted to live peacefully. The community center was only a 10-minute drive from my house. When I arrived at 6:50, I was shocked by what I saw. The parking lot was completely full. Cars lined the street for blocks. I had to park 3 streets away and walk back. When I entered the community center's main meeting room, I understood why. Every chair was occupied, and people were standing along the walls. There must have been over 100 residents there, in a neighborhood of only about 200 homes. That was an incredible turnout. Mrs. Chen spotted me immediately and waved me over to a seat she'd been saving in the front row. As I walked through the crowd, people patted my shoulder, whispered encouragement, and gave me supportive smiles. At the front of the room, seated at a long table, were the HOA board members. Margaret sat in the center, and when she saw me, her expression turned ice cold. The meeting was called to order at exactly 7 o'clock. The board secretary, a nervous-looking woman named Patricia, read the minutes from the last meeting in a shaky voice. Then Margaret stood up. "Before we proceed with regular business," she announced, "I want to address the elephant in the room. Many of you are here because of false rumors and misinformation about actions I've taken as your HOA president. I want to set the record straight." A murmur ran through the crowd, and it wasn't supportive. Margaret continued, her voice rising to be heard. "As your president, I took an oath to uphold the rules and regulations of this community. When I discovered that Mr. Harold Patterson was engaging in behavior that violated those rules and posed a potential safety risk, I did my duty. I investigated. I followed protocol. And yes, I took action to protect this neighborhood." "That's a lie," someone shouted from the back. Margaret's face flushed. "Order. I will have order. You don't understand the full situation. Mr. Patterson refused to cooperate. He harbors a dangerous animal, and he has created a hostile environment. The only hostile environment is the one you've created." Mrs. Chen stood up, her small frame vibrating with anger. "You've harassed this man for doing nothing wrong. You've abused your authority, and we're sick of it." The room erupted in applause and shouts of agreement. One of the board members, the gray-haired man from Friday, stood up. "Margaret, I think we need to hear from Mr. Patterson himself. He deserves a chance to respond to these accusations." Margaret looked like she wanted to argue, but she was outnumbered. "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. Mr. Patterson, would you like to address the board? I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. This was it. The moment where I could defend myself, where I could tell my side of the story. But before I could speak, the double doors at the back of the meeting room burst open with a loud bang. Everyone turned to look. 3 people in dark suits walked in, and I felt my heart nearly stop. I recognized one of them immediately. It was Director Sarah Mitchell, current director of the United States Secret Service, and she was looking directly at me. The room fell completely silent as the 3 figures in dark suits walked down the center aisle. Director Sarah Mitchell was flanked by 2 agents I didn't recognize, but their bearing, their alert eyes scanning the room, their subtle defensive positions. I knew exactly what they were. My stomach dropped. What were they doing here? How did they even know about this HOA meeting? Margaret recovered from her shock first. Excuse me, this is a private HOA meeting. You can't just barge in here. Who are you people? Director Mitchell didn't even glance at her. She walked straight to me, and for a terrible moment, I thought something had happened. Had there been a threat? Was there an emergency involving one of the former presidents I'd protected? Commander Patterson, she said, and I saw every head in the room turn toward me with confusion. I apologize for the interruption. We need to speak with you urgently. Commander? Margaret's voice was shrill with disbelief. What are you talking about? This is Harold Patterson, a retired nobody who... Mrs. Vance. Director Mitchell turned to her, and her voice carried such authority that Margaret actually took a step back. I strongly suggest you stop talking, now. One of the agents with her handed me a tablet. On the screen was a news alert, and when I read the headline, I understood everything. Former President James Anderson targeted in assassination attempt, suspect in custody. President Anderson. I'd protected him for 6 years during my service. He'd been out of office for nearly a decade now, but we'd stayed in touch. He sent me Christmas cards. He'd called me when Buddy was a puppy to ask how retirement was treating me. Is he all right? I asked immediately, my training kicking in. He's fine, Director Mitchell assured me. The threat was neutralized, but during interrogation, the suspect mentioned something that concerns us. He claimed he'd been watching several former Secret Service agents who had protected Anderson, gathering information. Your name came up, Commander. The room was absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The suspect had detailed information about your daily routines, your property layout, even your dog, Director Mitchell continued. We've been monitoring the situation, and when we saw that there was unusual activity at your residence last week, multiple vehicles, confrontations, even animal control being called, we became concerned that it might be connected to the threat. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course they'd been watching. Of course they knew about Margaret's visits, the animal control incident, all of it. The Secret Service doesn't take chances when it comes to protecting their own, even retired agents. We ran background checks on everyone who'd had contact with you in the past 2 weeks, one of the other agents said, looking at Margaret with cold eyes. Imagine our concern when we discovered that someone had been harassing you, making threats, attempting to have your guard dog removed from the property, and generally creating a vulnerable situation that could have been exploited by hostile actors. Margaret's face had gone from red to white. I didn't. I was just doing my job as HOA president. Your job? Director Mitchell's eyebrow raised. Your job is to harass a decorated veteran, a man who spent 35 years protecting this country's leaders, a man who holds the Presidential Medal of Freedom, among numerous other commendations. The room exploded in gasps and shocked murmurs. Mrs. Chen grabbed my arm. Harold? Is this true? I nodded slowly, feeling exposed in a way I hadn't felt in years. This was exactly what I'd wanted to avoid when I retired. I didn't want to be Commander Patterson anymore. I just wanted to be Harold, the quiet old man with the friendly dog. But the secret was out now. Margaret was shaking her head frantically. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? He never said anything. He's just been sitting in his yard all day like some kind of weirdo. Like some kind of weirdo. Mr. Abernathy stood up, his judge's voice booming through the room. That weirdo was protecting our presidents while you were probably still in elementary school, Mrs. Vance. That weirdo has done more for this country than you could ever dream of doing. The gray-haired board member stood as well. Margaret, I move that we immediately dismiss all complaints and violations filed against Mr. Patterson. All in favor? Every single board member's hand shot up, except Margaret's. Motion carries unanimously, he continued. Furthermore, I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in Margaret Vance's leadership as HOA president. Second. At least 10 voices called out. Margaret looked around wildly, realizing she was cornered. You can't do this. I have rights. I followed the rules. I didn't know who he was. That's exactly the problem, Mrs. Chen said, standing up to face her. You didn't know who he was, and you didn't care. You saw an old man living peacefully on his own property, and you decided to make his life miserable because he wouldn't bow to your petty authority. It didn't matter that he'd done nothing wrong. It didn't matter that he was kind and quiet and bothered no one. All that mattered was that you wanted to prove you were in charge. I was protecting the neighborhood, Margaret insisted, but her voice was desperate now. From what? Tom Rodriguez stood up. From a 72-year-old man reading books under a tree? From a gentle old dog who's never hurt anyone? From someone who might actually know more about real security and protection than you could ever imagine? Director Mitchell held up her hand, and everyone fell silent. For what it's worth, Mrs. Vance, you weren't entirely wrong to be concerned about someone sitting outside for long periods, watching the neighborhood. That could be suspicious behavior. The problem is your execution. A reasonable person would have approached Mr. Patterson respectfully, perhaps asked questions, tried to understand the situation. Instead, you made assumptions, threw around accusations, and abused your authority. And in doing so, you potentially compromised the security of a protected person. I could have you charged with interfering with federal security protocols, one of the other agents added. The fact that your harassment led to attempts to remove Commander Patterson's security dog could be considered a serious offense. Margaret sank into her chair, all the fight gone out of her. She looked small and defeated. However, Director Mitchell continued, Commander Patterson is retired, and this situation doesn't appear to have been malicious, just incompetent. We're not going to pursue charges, but we are going to recommend that local law enforcement be made aware of the situation, and that the HOA take appropriate action. The board secretary, Patricia, stood up nervously. All those in favor of removing Margaret Vance as HOA president, raise your hands. Every hand in the room went up. Margaret didn't even look. She just stared at the table in front of her. The motion passes, Patricia said quietly. Margaret, you're removed from your position effective immediately. We'll need your HOA records and keys by the end of the week. Margaret stood up slowly, gathered her things, and walked toward the exit. As she passed my row, she stopped and looked at me. I expected anger, defiance, maybe even more threats. Instead, her eyes were filled with tears. I really was just trying to do a good job, she whispered. I wanted people to respect me. I wanted to matter, and despite everything she'd put me through, I felt a twinge of pity. Here was a woman who had so desperately wanted to be important, to be in control, that she'd turned into a tyrant. She'd pushed and bullied and threatened, all because deep down, she felt small and powerless. Mrs. Vance, I said quietly, so only she could hear. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn, through kindness, through listening, through treating people the way you'd want to be treated. You could have had all the respect you wanted if you'd just been kind. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slightly and left the room. After she was gone, the meeting room erupted in conversation. People crowded around me, asking questions, congratulating me, apologizing for not standing up sooner. Director Mitchell and her agents stayed for a few more minutes, ensuring everything was resolved, then pulled me aside. Are you really okay, Commander? Director Mitchell asked, her professional facade softening. I know you value your privacy. I'm sorry this became so public. It's all right, I said. And I was surprised to find I meant it. Maybe it needed to come out. I've been hiding for 5 years, trying to be invisible. Maybe that was wrong. There's nothing wrong with wanting peace, she said. You earned it 1,000 times over. But you should also be proud of what you did, who you are. You don't have to hide that. She handed me her card. If you need anything, anything at all, you call me directly. We take care of our own, Commander, always. They left shortly after, and the HOA meeting dissolved into an impromptu celebration. People wanted to shake my hand, hear stories, thank me for my service. It was overwhelming but also, strangely, healing. Mrs. Chen stayed close by my side the whole time, beaming with pride. I knew there was something special about you, she kept saying. I knew it. Mr. Abernathy pulled me aside at one point. Harold, or should I say Commander, I want you to know that what Margaret did was wrong on every level. But I also want you to know that this neighborhood is lucky to have you. Not because you were Secret Service, but because you're a good man. That's what matters. Thank you, I said sincerely. That means a lot. The meeting finally ended around 10 o'clock. I drove home in a daze, processing everything that had happened. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw a figure sitting on my front porch. For a moment, my training kicked in, and I tensed. Then I recognized the silhouette. It was Margaret Vance. I approached cautiously. She stood up as I got closer, and in the porch light, I could see she'd been crying. Mr. Patterson, Commander Patterson, I know I have no right to be here. If you want me to leave, I'll leave. But I needed to say something to you, something I should have said a long time ago. I waited, saying nothing. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. I was trying to prove I was important by making everyone else feel small. I was so focused on being in charge that I forgot about being a good person. And you were exactly the kind of neighbor anyone would be lucky to have. And I treated you terribly." "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did you come after me so hard?" She wiped her eyes. "Honestly, because you didn't seem to care what I thought. Everyone else in the neighborhood either feared me or tried to please me. But you just existed, peacefully, happily. You didn't need my approval, didn't care about my authority. And that threatened me more than anything else could have. So, you tried to destroy that peace." "Yes," she looked down at her feet. "I know there's no excuse for what I did. I know sorry isn't enough. But I wanted you to know that tonight, when you said that thing about earning respect through kindness, that hit me hard. My husband has been saying the same thing for months, but I wouldn't listen. I thought being tough, being strict, being feared, was the same as being respected. It's not," I said gently. "Fear is easy. Respect is hard. I know that now." She took a shaky breath. "I'm going to resign from the HOA entirely. Not just as president, but from the board altogether. And I'm going to write a formal apology to you and to the neighborhood. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I heard you. And I'm going to try to be better." I studied her face in the dim light. She looked broken, humbled, genuinely remorseful. And I thought about all the times in my career when I'd had to make quick judgments about people. Who was a threat? Who could be trusted? Who deserved a second chance? "Mrs. Vance, I accept your apology," I said. "And I hope you do become better. Everyone deserves a chance to learn and grow." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you. You're a much better person than I deserve." She turned to leave, then stopped. "Can I ask you something? What's it like, knowing you've done something that really mattered? Something important?" I thought about that for a moment. "It's satisfying," I admitted. "But you know what I've learned? The small things matter just as much. Being kind to a neighbor, taking care of a dog, growing tomatoes, reading a book under a tree. Those things might not be as dramatic as protecting presidents, but they're what make life worth living. Everyone's life matters, Mrs. Vance. Everyone has the chance to do important things, just by being good to the people around them." She nodded slowly, processing that. "I wasted a lot of time trying to be important, instead of just being good. It's not too late to change that." She smiled slightly, the first genuine smile I'd ever seen on her face. "Thank you, Commander Patterson, for your service to our country, and for your kindness to someone who didn't deserve it." After she left, I went inside and found Buddy waiting for me, tail wagging. I sat down on the floor and let him climb into my lap, all 70 pounds of him, even though he was way too big for lap sitting. "What a day, Buddy," I murmured into his fur. "What a crazy day." He licked my face in agreement. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone flooded with messages. News of what had happened at the HOA meeting had spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, and now people wanted to interview me, write articles about me, even do a documentary about my Secret Service career. I declined all of it politely, but firmly. That wasn't why I'd told my story. I didn't want fame or attention. I just wanted to live my life. But I did agree to one thing. Mrs. Chen had asked if I would be willing to speak at the local high school's Veterans Day Assembly in November. She thought the students would benefit from hearing about service and sacrifice from someone who'd lived it. I said yes. Because maybe Director Mitchell was right. Maybe I didn't need to hide who I was. Maybe there was value in sharing what I'd learned, in inspiring the next generation to serve something bigger than themselves. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal. The HOA elected a new president, Mr. Abernathy, who ran unopposed and won unanimously. His first act was to review and revise all the HOA rules, making them more reasonable, and focused on genuine community improvement, rather than petty control. Margaret and her husband moved out of the neighborhood about a month later. Mrs. Chen told me they'd relocated to a different part of the state for her husband's job. I heard through the grapevine that Margaret had started volunteering at a local food bank, working quietly without any authority or recognition. I hoped that was true. I hoped she'd found a better path. As for me, I went back to my peaceful routines. Morning walks with Buddy, afternoons under the oak tree with a good book, evenings working in my garden. But there was one change. I no longer felt like I had to hide. When neighbors waved, I waved back and sometimes stopped to chat. When Mrs. Chen invited me to a block party, I went and actually enjoyed myself. When kids asked if they could pet Buddy, I not only said yes but sometimes told them stories about the places we'd been, the things we'd seen. I was still Harold Patterson, retired and enjoying the quiet life. But I was also Commander Patterson, a man who'd served his country with honor, and I was learning that I could be both. One afternoon in late fall, I was sitting under my oak tree when I saw a car pull into my driveway. My hand instinctively moved toward where I used to carry my sidearm before I remembered I was retired and unarmed, but it was just a visitor. A woman in her early 30s got out, looking nervous. She walked toward me hesitantly, and I stood to greet her. "Commander Patterson," she asked. "I'm Jessica Martinez. I'm Officer Martinez's sister, the animal control officer who came here a few months ago." "I remember him," I said. "He was very professional about a difficult situation. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," she said quickly. "Actually, I'm here because my brother told me about what happened, and about who you are. And I wanted to ask you something. I'm a journalist, and I'm working on a series about everyday heroes, people who've done extraordinary things, but live ordinary lives now. Would you be willing to let me interview you? Not for some big expose or anything sensational. Just a conversation about service, about transition to civilian life, about finding peace after years of high-stress work." I started to decline automatically, but then I stopped. I thought about the high school students I'd spoken to last week for Veterans Day. I thought about how their eyes had lit up when I talked, not about the exciting parts of my job, but about the values, duty, honor, sacrifice, and the importance of protecting those who can't protect themselves. I thought about Margaret, and how she'd been so desperate to be important that she'd forgotten to be good. I thought about all the young people out there who might be struggling with the same things, who might benefit from hearing that importance isn't about power or control. It's about service and kindness. "All right," I said. "I'll do the interview. On one condition." "What's that?" "I want to talk about more than just my Secret Service career. I want to talk about what I've learned since retiring, about community, about the importance of treating people with respect, regardless of who they are or what authority you have, about how real strength comes from kindness, not force." Jessica smiled. "That sounds like exactly the kind of story I want to tell." We did the interview over the course of several afternoons, sitting under my oak tree with Buddy dozing at our feet. Jessica asked thoughtful questions, and I found myself opening up about things I hadn't talked about in years. I told her about the presidents I'd protected and the incredible responsibility of that job. I told her about the moment I decided to retire, when I realized I'd given everything I had to public service and needed to find out who I was beyond the job. I told her about moving to Meadowbrook Hills, about building my little sanctuary, about finding peace in simple things. And yes, I told her about Margaret Vance and the HOA incident, but I framed it not as a story about a villain getting her comeuppance, but as a story about how power without empathy becomes tyranny, and how everyone deserves a chance at redemption. The article came out in a major magazine 2 months later. The title was, "Commander Patterson's Final Mission, Finding Peace and Teaching Kindness." It was fair, honest, and beautiful. Jessica had captured everything I'd wanted to say about the importance of service, the challenge of transition, and the value of ordinary kindness in an often harsh world. The response was overwhelming. I got letters from veterans who'd struggled with retirement, from young people inspired to pursue public service, from teachers who wanted to use the article in their classes, and I got one letter that surprised me more than all the others. It was from Margaret Vance. "Dear Commander Patterson," it read. "I saw the article about you in the magazine. I want you to know that reading it made me cry, but in a good way. You could have painted me as a monster in that story. Lord knows I gave you reason to. But instead, you talked about redemption and second chances. You showed me more grace in print than I ever showed you in person. I want you to know that I've been working on being better. I volunteer at the food bank 3 days a week now. I've been seeing a therapist to work on my need for control and my fear of being unimportant, and I've been practicing what you said about earning respect through kindness. It's hard. It's much harder than being mean and demanding, but it's also so much more rewarding. Thank you for not giving up on me when I'd given up on myself. Thank you for showing me that it's never too late to change. With gratitude and respect, Margaret Vance." I kept that letter in my desk drawer, and sometimes when I felt frustrated with the world or discouraged about the state of things, I'd take it out and read it. It reminded me that people can change, that kindness matters, and that even our worst moments can become opportunities for growth. Life continued its peaceful rhythm. Seasons changed. My garden flourished. Buddy got a little grayer around the muzzle, and so did I. The neighborhood thrived under Mr. Abernathy's gentle leadership, becoming the kind of community where people actually looked out for each other instead of looking for violations. I stayed in touch with Director Mitchell and some of my old Secret Service colleagues. I attended reunions and memorial services. I told stories when asked but didn't dwell in the past, because I'd learned something important. Your past might shape you, but it doesn't have to define you. I was proud of my service, honored by my career, and grateful for the experiences I'd had. but I was equally grateful for the quiet life I'd built afterward. One evening, about a year after the HOA incident, I was sitting under my oak tree watching the sunset, when Mrs. Chen came walking across my lawn with a basket. "Harold, I brought you some of those dumplings you like," she said, settling onto the bench beside me. "You spoil me," I said, accepting the basket gratefully. "You deserve to be spoiled." She looked around at my property, at the peaceful scene we were sitting in. "You know, when you first moved here, I thought you were just a sweet old man who wanted to be left alone." "That's exactly what I was," I said with a smile. "But you're so much more than that. You're a hero, Harold. A real hero." I shook my head. "The real heroes are the ones who do the right thing when nobody's watching. The ones who choose kindness when they could choose cruelty. The ones who stand up for others even when it's hard. People like you, standing up for me at that HOA meeting. That's heroism too." She patted my hand. "Then I guess we're all heroes, in our own small ways." "Exactly," I said. "We're all heroes in our own small ways." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Buddy snored softly at our feet. In the distance, I could hear children playing, neighbors chatting, life happening all around us in its beautiful, ordinary way. This was what I'd protected all those years. Not just presidents or policies or political systems. This, the simple right of people to live peacefully, to enjoy their homes, to build communities, to grow old with dignity and grace. And now, instead of standing between danger and those I protected, I was simply part of the community I'd spent my life defending. I was no longer watching from the shadows, alert and ready. I was sitting in the sunlight, at peace, surrounded by friends. It was, I reflected, a pretty good way to live. The next morning, I woke to the sound of birds singing and sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. Buddy was already awake, tail wagging, ready for our morning walk. I got dressed, made coffee, and stepped out onto my porch. The air was crisp and clean, full of the promise of a new day. Mrs. Chen was in her garden, and she waved. Tom Rodriguez jogged past with his dog, calling out a cheerful good morning. The mail carrier honked and waved as she drove by. This was my life now. No threats to assess, no protectees to guard, no high-stakes decisions that could mean life or death. Just an old man, his loyal dog, and a community that had become his family. I walked down my porch steps and headed toward the oak tree, Buddy bounding ahead happily. As I walked, I thought about all the paths that had led me here. From a young man joining the Secret Service, through decades of dedicated service, to retirement and the struggle to find meaning beyond the job, to this moment of perfect, simple contentment. I thought about Margaret Vance and how fear and insecurity had driven her to become someone she never wanted to be. I thought about how confronting her had inadvertently revealed my past and changed everything. I thought about how what seemed like a crisis at the time had actually become an opportunity, for connection, for teaching, for showing that kindness and strength aren't opposites but partners. Most of all, I thought about the lesson I'd learned and tried to share, that every person has value, every act of kindness matters, and the smallest life lived with integrity and compassion is worth more than the largest life lived with cruelty and pride. I reached my oak tree and sat down on the bench I'd built so many years ago. Buddy settled at my feet with a contented sigh. I opened my book, a new one this time, about gardens and growing things, and began to read. The morning sun filtered through the leaves above me, creating patterns of light and shadow on the pages. A gentle breeze rustled the branches. Somewhere nearby, a cardinal sang its morning song. I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do, being Harold Patterson, retired Secret Service commander, neighbor, friend, gardener, reader, dog owner, and most importantly, just a man trying to live a good life and treat people with the kindness and respect they deserve. It was, I thought with deep satisfaction, more than enough. Thank you for reading. HOA officer confronts me for having a quiet time on my land. Realizes I'm a Secret Service commander. I hope this story reminded you that true strength comes from kindness, that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their title or position, and that it's never too late to change and become a better person. Remember to treat others the way you'd want to be treated. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, and find peace in life's simple pleasures. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales.